was before COVID and the shutdown.
Oh, I see.
What we suggest
Hey, Janice.
is
Nice to see you.
Ida. From the,
Oh, yeah, it's all good.
Someone could sit over there. Some people could sit here. Marcus, you can see we can
I'm
spread out a
fine,
little
just
bit.
observing a little distance, I'll chime in, can you door open for air?
Yeah, why not?
What's the next to you?
Michael?
Patricia. Okay, look at mine.
So, thank you all for this, appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, so let's go around. I recognize many of you from TV land, but Marcus, of course.
Marcus D.
Steve, Melissa Greg Weisner.
Okay.
Ida.
Ida.
Patricia.
Michael. Seth. Peter, he's our city attorney.
Hi, Peter.
Works on government assets. Janice, of course, is our communications director. I wish we were in a place where you take these masks off because all this is fog at night.
We can just talk extra loud.
I'm going to take a few notes, so please speak up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we have to find a safer place for folks.
I wish we could meet outside, but it's so loud with even the wind, you know, it's just,
I wish we could go up on the roof.
I've never been there, that sounds
Yeah,
good.
it's pretty cool, actually. But,
We need to find
So-
the housing.
as you know, last week, City announced the intention to make a public site available for an emergency camping facility.
Are you talking about Byron Street?
No, we're talking about a public site owned by the city, the particular site of which not been identified. I mean, it could be, we've got a number of sites, many of which you're familiar with, including behind City Hall. We have looked at sort of the minimal requirements as it relates to permitting. There have to be some conditions. We have to have an organization, some kind, with whom we can partner that is able to take on the role of overseeing some minimal requirements and supervision. So in that fray, we're trying to refine things and focus in on what might result in a solution. I spoke with health department officials today, and not surprisingly, they indicated it's because of the cramped quarter and all the obvious reasons that that's not a permanent site, obviously. I think you know that it's technically in violation of the BMC, but we're not enforcing that. No, I'm sorry, the Bellingham Municipal Code. It's just I'm sorry?
Which part of the code?
I don't know, you know the citation off the top of your head?
Yeah, so the city lawn is managed by the Parks Department, so it's part of the Parks and Open Space, and so it's essentially camping in a park, same code division.
Also under the code, I have noticed that there's no camping in any of the parks, unless you have written permission from the parks director.
It is public property, right?
So written permission could be had. is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
That was it, yes? You said that?
It is public property.
Yes.
It is. So, but the health department indicated that we need to find a more appropriate space. So, amongst all those pieces, and the county has indicated an interest in partnering. So we're trying to refine the various pieces into something that might result in a plan. And one of the fundamental needs at the beginning, of course, is having some form of organizational partner on this with whom we can enter into a relationship and permit. I understand that amongst all the of you, there's interest in forming some form of organization that could supervise an emergency camping site. Is that correct?
Would you be liable if someone freezes to death in a tent?
What was that?
Would you be liable if someone freezes to death in a tent? I mean, camping is, as we know, inadequate.
I think we've all come to an agreement that tents are inadequate
Yeah, so
for shelter.
is
Haven't we? I mean, Winter Haven sure proved it. It was a smashing success as a model with great supervision and still failed as shelter.
I do know
So
we
that's
have,
something we talk
we
about.
have 40 pallet shelters, not made up of us, but built up right away as shelters, really easy to get in play going on in the county level that's being funded by CARES Act. So there's 40 shelters here.
Well, I'm not defining the type of shelter. I'm just saying a site.
Right, so a camping, an emergency encampment can be indeed tiny homes, and probably should be, is what I'm saying, but that's me as advocate speaking.
I do want to look into the terms of camping. Just,
Okay.
And it's just,
Yeah.
but if you can assure.
Do you have a definition of what an encampment is, or is that anywhere in the BMC?
Yeah, we have.
I prefer emergency shelter personally.
Yeah, I like the language shelter too. At least it,
Well, even the base camp is considered an indoor encampment.
It's an encampment, so it's something state laws put out that allows certain land use that can go on a quicker timeline.
I see.
The BMC provision for I'll get it to you while you guys keep talking.
Okay.
But I hear what you're
I
saying.
appreciate you hearing it through
Yeah.
because it avoids state stuff that qualifies as shelter or whatnot that would require more code and whatnot.
Okay.
So yeah,
Fair enough.
Great,
So-
I do appreciate that.
And you were saying that there was no determined location yet that the city is working on. You're trying to figure out what permitting requirements are necessary for whatever prospective places you have?
Right. So we have the City of Bellingham has a number of public locations, as you know. Some of which might be well suited for a public sheltering site of some sort, and others that don't. And so staff has been looking at those lists and sort of identifying which ones would be better.
Would you take our recommendations?
We'd certainly consider, you're probably going to say the site over by the Depot Market Square.
We have a few in mind.
What you thinking?
Yeah.
I know that Tyler Bird actually came up with the idea of Depot Market Square and defined it for me in my mind, and I would really like this idea.
We also recognize that that's a county property, and that's something that we would need to take up with St. Paul and the county council.
Right. What are you thinking, Ida?
Well, we are pushing to get 50 pallet shelters approved by the county and have them put about different locations in Bellingham. One of them is a Winter Haven site that will be, we're looking at the property right behind the City Hall, that parking lot there.
That's
20
one of the sites that we're considering too.
20 shelters. And that'll also be really helpful for us, moving forward with our current project and our current encampment, as well as a safe haven out on Alabama. I think it's 620 Alabama Street, if I'm remembering correctly.
Whatcom is, we know that one.
And we're also looking at the property across from, I forgot the name of the cemetery on Lakeway. Clean Green? What's it
Clean
called?
Green.
Clean Green.
And Green State Baby Cemetery.
And I believe you'll probably find HomesNOW trying to make a grab for safe haven still if they can. I know that they got bounced back for the RFQ, but they're still interested in that, and I think.
Okay.
I'm not speaking for HomesNOW, but I'm pretty sure.
All of those are sites that are on the list. Do you have anything else, Ida?
Not at this time, but we're definitely interested in learning more about your process and what constraints there are around the certain permitting and land use and stuff.
Okay.
I have experience doing organizing around land acquisitions, so I'm happy to plug
answer your
in.
question, it's chapter 20.15.
Thank you. Chapter 20.15. Thank you.
So you'd asked about just the basic types of permitting rules, so certain operational rules, drug and alcohol-free rules, public health requirements, COVID safety requirements that we would probably actually come from the health department.
We would love the health department to to work with us and make sure that we have
Yep, no,
these things
they'd
taken
be a
care
part of this.
Can I ask for clarification on the drugs now code?
Sure.
What are you requiring of our campers for that?
Well, chime in here.
Well, I think we're listening. I think we're more in listening mode right now. I think, but I think one of the questions is, what do you guys envision for what are the minimal rules that would apply to?
You have to be
For
homeless.
us to establish, okay, that's.
Well, I mean, I don't want to speak for the mayor. We're here to listen. I'm not saying that we're just going to accept.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good because a lot of us are here to listen to, so this is good.
Go back and forth. But I mean, are you know, one of the requirements is that we have to have some organization with whom we enter into agreements with to use our public sites. And so, as it relates to that, have you given thought to what kind of organizational structure you might propose?
Absolutely, it's very important to use adults with developmental disability caregiving. They have a lot of trauma, a lot of mental health issues as well. In a very similar way, a lot of these homeless individuals do have conditions which are mentally related or disability related that they've had their whole life. That will be one. But yeah, we will definitely want to make sure these requirements require a cohesive, peaceful environment, which is beneficial to the individuals. We want to make sure that the homeless individuals are fully engaged in the process of that. A lot of the individuals we would select, I think there are some great individuals I think we can get the ball rolling with, and hearing their input and what kind of environment they would like to see. You'd be very surprised, but a lot of these individuals do want a lot of requirements that keep the things that have been traumatizing and re-traumatizing as in living in the homeless community, stealing, drug use, that triggers their own addiction and whatnot that they're dealing with. Making sure the peace of mind of the individuals is most important. And that our ability to manage the site is
Key.
So when you talk about we, who is the we? What is the, what's my
collective individuals, we need to highlight people with caregiving minimum skills and professionals in that sense, not just skills but and experience, but people who are certified to manage these. So it would be expansive how in volunteer base we're going, and people are connecting with the homeless people at the moment and to be better advocates, listen to the homeless and not be ableists in the sense that they can help themselves in a lot of ways, and that our home care should be built towards rehabilitating them, giving them opportunity to do a lot of the needs around the camp. I really think in an optimal world that we need really minimal individuals to be on site, and they are actively fully participating in all functions of the camp. But I do understand there's a lot of de-escalation need.
I think what Michael is trying to say is that the current organizational structures of, let's say, for example, the Opportunity Council and the Lighthouse Mission and Roads to Home, for example, are not effective organizational structures to make campers feel safe, secure, and willing to engage and participate in their organization. We are a collective of individuals that are completely decentralized. So there is no established organization. We are a bunch of community members and homeless advocates that are working with the campers and working all together to come up with systems and structures within the space that we have claimed to make people feel safe, accounted for, secure, and get their needs met. And I think what we're trying to convey here is that it is possible for us to implement things, potentially, like in the future or soon, land trusts, worker-tenant cooperatives, to be able to have organizational structure that is sustainable and that everyone feels vested in, everyone feels safe and secure in. So that's what we're working towards right now. we can't identify an organization for you, but this is an emergency right now. This is an emergency encampment situation, and we are willing, with the human resources that we have and the human resources that we're confident that we'll be able to resource, be able to make something happen.
Okay. Do you have any sense of the numbers of people that you think would be available to?
Well, there's,
Campers and volunteers.
yeah, right. I think,
Both
go ahead,
campers and
please.
volunteers. It's both campers and volunteers.
It's always growing.
Yeah,
Always growing.
You'll find a lot of the homeless individuals do have some semi-form of housing and do want to give back. So I think a lot of these individuals would be able to help on the outside and come in as outsiders, come into the camp as well. Yeah, I think outreaching more individuals, and I know there are a lot which first they just don't want to come down here just because it's COVID. We don't encourage them to come down here, but they are participating on the outside, dropping off things. And yeah, we'll definitely collect and gather all the resources. We need a lot more training.
And Doug has said that he would open up the volunteer list as well as needed, because there are volunteers who are chomping at the bit to do stuff. But of course, once Unity Village was built, how many did it take to run it? Hardly anybody.
Is it a structure, you talked about it's a collective of individuals and it's decentralized. Is there a way in which, despite those aspects, that it can still be characterized in some organizational way so that there's a
Co-op.
Co-op.
It's cooperative. We shop at one all the time here in
That's,
Bellingham.
when we're open to you guys coming up with something else too. When I say we, I mean I've been thinking this over with these guys, and I think a co-op could be a really great compromise to help soften, as I talked to you yesterday, Seth, to soften the language in the permitting process to allow more access by citizens.
And that really, that will also be a big, depend on how many volunteers we get is what your guys' legal jargon wording is. So a little bit of that would fall on your guys' plate as to allow us to ease up a little bit in a cooperative situation to allow those people to come in.
Okay.
There'll be much training of volunteers who don't have quite the best skills to work with individuals, and there is some that kind of baby campers or respond in not so good ways for the
Out of touch.
emotional health of individuals.
Totally.
They should step away a lot of times when individuals are escalating, being more creative, informed, less ego, and I think we can train many people to do that. And not only this, but having a community of people is exactly the model in which this rehabilitation is optimal. These individuals I'm seeing out here, guys that are in their heads, stuck walking, talking to themselves all day, don't think other people want to talk to them, but what we're seeing out here is magic, because these individuals are interacting and realizing I am a participatory, valued citizen of this collective, and just that model right there is pretty amazing. What we're seeing, I think a lot of these individuals are the troubled people that all the mission could not have, and they are on the same place at the same time, and we are doing a dang good job of making sure that no one gets hurt and not doing anything towards the government building that's right next to them.
We haven't even had any camper fights. Like,
Yeah.
like
Not
there's
a
so
fight.
many disturbed and aggressive people in that camp, and you know what? We have done, these people specifically, the crew that's out there volunteering their time on the ground, have done better and more de-escalation with basically no training than, and I know that this is coming out of me, so y'all are going to take it with a grain of salt, but your cops cannot do this job. And most of your other social workers can't.
Yeah.
Many of us are trained on this.
Yeah.
And with what experience I
A lot of us
have
are. Yeah, that's true.
to watch somebody who's got a problem walk up to somebody who's screaming and say, "Man, you know you can't do that. I'm talking to you. You know me," and they just like, "Okay."
Yeah. That's what every time.
You know, it's like watching two people sort it out. Done. You know,
It's just on a
pretty
completely
amazing.
different wavelength than you guys, because you think normal.
I'm learning about this population, you know, many of them I've known for years. I'm just like, wow, you know, they actually work well together. They, you know, and they get a chance to do that. That could be great.
But I think it's
Yes.
one aspect is not the fact that we are the right fit, that our skills are right, just that the current model is not working. Those individuals, you know, there should be this many people that are not allowed into the shelter. It gets really difficult, I imagine, for the mission in whatnot, but I do feel that it's been mismanaged. I don't want to get involved in this. I think we can all, I don't want to compare apples to oranges, but I do feel that we can all support and add to all of our resources with homeless individuals and many different organizations. I want to compliment the mission.
And like as a shelter worker, and I know that this is humans versus animals, but sometimes you can just take that away and it applies. The mission is like a no-kill shelter. They pick some of your better behaved, and they can only do these ones, and the ones that are going to look good. Same like Lydia's place. Lydia's place won't take very many problematic single mothers. You know, they only want the ones picture perfect, so that they can go, look, we rehabilitated this mildly, you know, disturbed person, and everything's fine. That leaves a huge swath of screamers, drug addicted, and people with issues that can't garner those services, or people like me who can't go into a big crowd of people like that with my special needs son and get out of it in one piece. Like, there's just so many people that are underserviced by one type of model. It doesn't matter what that one type of model is. Yes, we all have personal problems with the church model, but it's besides that. It's the fact that you've got one shelter that can only take 200 people out of our 700. We just have to, we need more. We need more, and we need ones that will take on the more problem cases. We need some of
It's
those.
fair to say there's a lot of whereases coming in.
Whereas they have failed here, or they're not representing this here. That's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to gather up the ones that they can't help. You know. So.
I'd like to hear what Patty has to say.
We have just noticed, you know, that there's, when I first came to Bellingham, you know, it was like, it has the most nonprofits in the world. Yet there's still so many issues that we're seeing. So there has to be something wrong with the organizational model that is required of us. And we don't want to partake in that sort of thing because it just continues perpetuating the same issues that we're currently trying to solve. So,
whereas we have our RFPs burning up and nobody taking them.
you know, there's entire shelters that make money off of doing what we're doing, and they're not doing that. I've talked to the more like lucid campers, and even they get rejected from basic shelters. So when you have these sort of requirements, it's like raising the question about who or who does not have the right to basic shelter. You know, like we've noticed that it doesn't work when you set up these requirements because there are still people out on the streets. So by taking a different approach to a different model, sure, it might be different from the status quo. It might be a little bit more decentralized than what you're used to. But what people are used to is homeless people out on the street too, and we don't want to be used to that. So we have to come up with new solutions, even if it's shaking the status quo a little bit.
Okay.
There's other ways of handling this situation. And it could just be done, you know?
Okay. Peter, did you have some questions?
I was going to ask, you know, and you're right, we do, like as a city, we typically contract with them. I mean, there's audit reasons for that. Auditors come in and look at, okay, you got a contract for this service or this license. If this is a site, it would probably be a license. So one of the things that we always look at in the legal department isn't, I'm not saying there's no other way to do it, is to say, okay, who's going to sign it? And they're signing it on behalf of an entity. So I'm just throwing that out there to see, is there any, and what I would say on that too is there a model that's been done anywhere in the country along the line of what
Philadelphia.
you're saying? I did some, you know, I've looked at this at different times and there's different models. Typically, all the models that I see is there's some organizational structure, a nonprofit that's incorporated through the state of Washington that can buy insurance and that kind of thing. So I'd be curious whether you
I would love to comment on the whole nonprofit thing. What you're going to see time and time again throughout nonprofit work is that you will have properties opened up to nonprofits so that we can buy them and we can use it for shelters. But what that just creates is another vacuum of not dealing with the issues that we need to be dealing with. So by creating a nonprofit, you are then contributing to the same system. Again, Bellingham has the most nonprofits in the world, in the country, according to Bellingham, and we still have these issues. So it's like, how good of a concept is nonprofit if it's not working? That's why we need to reevaluate that. We're just simply reevaluating that. And we've all noticed that you guys need some sort of organizational heads but we're trying to make a point that a cooperative is the best, probably the best route to take.
Where in the BMC does it state that there needs to be an organizational entity signing on the dotted line?
Well, it talks about a sponsor. There's different places. If you look at that code provision, it does refer to a sponsor or organization of some kind.
Organization is a very broad term. It could potentially include something that you think of as a cooperative, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my mind around, and again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the organizational structure. I'm just trying to figure out how that aligns with how the city has to operate.
That's why I'm wondering where it is in the code, because that could be something that could be revised.
Some of it's in state law, and for example, we have to have a contractual relationship with someone, and to have a contractual relationship, we have to have a party and an entity.
Yeah, I think in the forming of a group that actually would, not just that we're volunteering, but actually would long-term keep up this encampment, that we would want to create some sort of a structure that is involved in training and qualifications of individuals, and that we're happy to do that and come back. I feel that we have to talk about first, but come back with the structure and whatnot, but that would be slightly separate from individuals advocating for their rights. But just in the sense, I think we can probably definitely create some organization and something that would be slightly different from all this volunteer based and whatnot, but it would be very applicable to the atmosphere of the camp itself, the emergency camp.
I'm wondering if this is like a chicken and egg situation. So would you be willing to approve the properties for the pallet shelters to go on before that contractual relationship was created?
The short answer is I don't know, because that involves another partnership between the city and the county.
I see.
And
Well, let's say that they approve the pallet shelters. If they approve the pallet shelters, would you be willing to approve the locations that we propose, or the locations that you may select, right, for those pallet shelters to go on as we coordinate our organizational structure?
We're worried about time.
We're worried about time.
And
We
we are
don't
too.
want them out there. We
Yeah.
don't want them out there.
Yeah.
We actually don't want them out there either. It sucks out there. We
Yeah.
don't want them inside.
I mean, in some respects, it seems like the site and whatever structures are on it and the whoever's going to manage and operate it are all, they all kind of go hand in hand. You can't, I don't know if you can pick one without the other. Honestly, if you have three
There's
sites,
no-
3 different management teams, if you have, so anyway, just.
I respectfully disagree.
That's the current
I respectfully
system.
disagree with that.
Sorry.
No, I respectfully disagree, because, I mean, if we're trying to get these people homes, if we're trying to get our neighbors spaces to have heated shelter, then we need property, we need land to do that on. So why can't we just reserve that space for when things come into action?
Well, I think we've indicated a willingness to assure a site. So to that extent, we have done that. And we are doing the logistical work of envisioning, making an assumption that if we find an organizational partner with whom we can enter into an agreement, that we'll be able to go relatively quickly. There's still, I mean, even if you're familiar with the county vote yesterday, even if they were to go forward with that ASAP, they're not going to be available for some brief period of time. So
I'm told next Monday they can bring in the shelters and start assembly.
I've been told that it's longer than
I know, I heard
We
that.
can-
I heard that too.
We can get to the bottom of
Yeah,
that.
no, I heard that too, so I just wanted to let you know.
But your point's well taken. I mean, we need to be able to start taking action now. I think what we'll find, the object today was to get some information from you that we can then go back and think about, try to get creative. We're open to that. We're trying to find a solution.
There's no harm in saving space and holding space.
What's that?
I said there's no harm in saving space, holding space for when this needs to move. That's all I'm saying.
I agree.
I
I agree.
do think we could create some pretty concrete organization and reach out to individuals pretty fast and create a working group that would work on specifically the new sheltering,
Yeah.
emergency sheltering system. I do want to question the comment that one organization and one management team would work on one site. There's many nonprofits in this town that do have multiple sites. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke if I did.
oh, thank you. That's fine. Yeah, we can't do capacity and growing capacity. But the idea is with a cooperative is that we are open to the community at large, and that is the concept. And that we will have the systems in place to weed out staff that don't work in the model, that really are causing trouble, and we have a larger community at play that can support this. And
Is there forgive me, go ahead, I cut you off.
very good.
I'd like to hear what Patty has to say.
Is it
Did you have
Patricia?
something? Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you mention, I think you had asked if there was an example of a cooperative model, and I thought I heard you say Philadelphia or something. Is there
In
a particular-
Philly, people were able to negotiate with the city about 50 properties, and it wasn't like an established organization of any sort. Like, if you guys are concerned about who is going to run these shelters, be aware that there are willing and able people who want to run these shelters. It's just the ability to access the shelters. We want to be able to do that without having to declare ourselves as anything. But also there's multiple organizations working on this. So it's like,
So I'm sorry, is there a, like, no, on the model that you mentioned, so just to be totally transparent, what I do is like, okay, there's got to be some documents. At the end of the day, there's documents that say, okay, this person is committed to this entity's committed to that. And so I like to go look at examples. So can you get me, like, do you have a site to something where I can say, oh, okay, this is how they did it in Philadelphia?
yeah, you could just also Google like 50 properties allocated to Philly. They did the exact same thing. They were camping on a site, and they were trying to, because of the same issues that are happening here, they were trying to get housing. And what the city was trying to do is turn it into a bunch of different other things so we can get permits and permissions, which is fine, but like they were able to access property and they were able to themselves allocate it accordingly. And there wasn't any like issues or requirements. It was just getting people housing immediately because it is an emergency. And Marcus had something to say.
We're very open to looking at models. I'd like to see that.
And if I may, just some whereas, if you will. Whereas we've had some experience in this town with a more decentralized sheltering system, where volunteers had more access to really what was smashing it. Whereas we have that on the front lawn even now, that as haphazard as things are, with various behavior issues, drug issues, everything on one, it's all here. It's pretty amazing to see how people are willing to, okay, I'll curb my own behavior in the sake of community.
I have kept Zach out of a mess just by buddying up with him and making the promise that we both won't go to jail beating up cops. It's really that easy sometimes.
Super easy.
But on these whereas,
Sounds
there's a
gnarly, but
history.
it's
We do have a history within this community of being able to do that. And so what I mean by that is that in that light, when we find that we have like nonprofits like HomesNOW who won't take government dollars, it makes it difficult for them to take the government money. They won't take the government money, so then the RFP goes by. I get all that stuff, and this is part of that stumbling block right there. If we all felt that if the government were to help provide infrastructure, you take a site like Clean Green, you put in 4 different power sources, water, toilets, get with the county to do it. Actually, this is something that I talked with Zach about months ago, and he was like, that's a great idea. We would help with that. To provide the infrastructure so that a poor nonprofit or group like this who doesn't have an ability to take in money with the tax number and everything else, but the actual infrastructure provided for the government so that the people can come in and do that management. I think that it's probably wise to have somebody with some social worker skills and stuff like that in almost every case because of that. But that's not that hard either. They're citizens too. And if it's identified that that's needed, and leaving people out on the lawn or in the ditch or wherever that is, or an RFP that goes untaken because of those lack of skills, we really need to identify those people and hire those people for the same reason. That would be the infrastructure that's needed to be hired. If we can't source it voluntarily within your town, we still have the same problem with people living in the ditches, so maybe we need to look at the hiring. It's such a big picture, and I don't mean to take it too far, but in reality, if you bought the structures, then you're not putting out hotel vouchers, you're not renting a space that burns up, leasing a space that burns up in a year, and you have to redo it again next winter because we have more emergency. Instead, you own the shelters, and so next year's budget cycle, you say, you know what, I think we need to hire some social workers so we can do this well. And you know what, that you own the structure for the next 10 years. It's not like you can't afford to do that with that. And instead of throwing money at hotel vouchers, instead of throwing money at expensive leases, and Byron Street's been such a it's a bad example right now. So I'm glad it's going to be coming online. Also, whereas the people that will be inhabiting the Byron Street facility will probably not be one of these people, because the Opportunity Council has their list. As homeless advocate for Whatcom County, I feel terribly for these people, but I also feel for the families and stuff that are living in cars that are on the OC's list, and they need to get in there. I agree with that. We need more shelter.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you look at the systems already in place and see what type of issues that they bring. What the things we're doing is we're talking to campers, and the things they let us know about how the structure works and the missions and the Opportunity Council is just completely opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you guys could look at what fails in the structures, and because you have the political expertise that you do, look at it and then see what one can do, because we're out here coming up with solutions to problems that we didn't even create. So just look at how nonprofits don't work. Look at the ways that they don't either, because it's a problem. It's like we're hurting people with requirements, you know what I mean? When it's a human right to have a house or to have a shelter. Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to clarify is I think the legal entity can be doesn't really determine how the organization functions. So in other words, you could have a collective management structure, yet still be registered as a nonprofit. So I just want to separate those two issues in our minds.
I understand that, but the nonprofit organizations that are currently in place are still running on hierarchical structures.
So once you have that hierarchical structure, you make it so that there is less communication between the people you are serving and the people who are leading, so-called, which is what we're trying to avoid. And we will see this problem in a lot of the nonprofits.
We see it in our community too, with the stratification, right? And the class, the classism.
That's how you end up with people working in shelters who sneer at homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to be creative in the sense that just because we say we need to have a legal entity to sign a document doesn't determine how that structure is going to be. There's some requirements in state law. I'm not an expert in nonprofit law. All I'm saying is that just because we say we need a legal entity doesn't necessarily predetermine how the organization is going to function. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they have to be hierarchical according to state law, but I suspect that there are.
That's why we don't want to, we want to look at what that sort of thing looks like. But this is just me personally. I'm not speaking for anyone here. I hesitate to sign anything that has implemented the same systems that have subjected these people to these living conditions. So it's I understand that we can be a nonprofit that doesn't behave like that. But in doing so, you are also enabling the nonprofits who don't behave like they're supposed to.
It's true. It makes it really hard for HomesNOW to compete in that same atmosphere. Like I said, RFPs just go by and then they go, HomesNOW should have taken that. It's really?
A lot. What you will see in this system is nonprofits competing for resources, which is a shame. A shame.
I'm sorry, say that last part.
You will see nonprofits competing for resources. I have a lot of friends who majored and graduated from Western Washington University with human resources, And nonprofits are just another vacuum if they're not structured properly. So when you're forced to structure something that doesn't work under the same systems that don't work, you're basically just adding another problem, you know what I mean? Like, they have to compete for resources when
It's
we
another
shouldn't have
business.
to. It's another business. It's another thing for profit. That's why you end up with requirements. That's how you end up with a community land trust that requires people to pay $50,000 to $100,000 for a shelter, which is, to you and me, fine, because we can afford it, but people don't have that. So it's like, you're making it's like all these hurdles just to get something basic, you know?
It sounds like you guys want to identify a group of individuals who are going to sign on to a deal, and Patty definitely wants to say we do want to negotiate what that might require for campers in the future. But I do think it would be not so hard for myself to identify individuals that are willing to take a lot of time into helping these homeless shelters. Myself, I would be unemployed and give all my time personally just to see these people survive.
Yeah, it's not a problem managing it. We have people that are willing and able to manage the shelters. It's actually getting that.
But I do feel it would be very easy to figure out people who would be managing those shelters in a way that can be fair. It wouldn't be higher deal if the right individuals
Are selected.
Right intent.
Mm-hmm.
Can I clarify? So a larger selection, I mean, of individuals can make that happen.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as a problem.
Okay. Just so, I'm just not hearing very well. You said it's not a problem with the management,
It's getting
The sites.
it's getting the sites, the property allocation. That's,
okay,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, it's just another, if you want us to be another cog, like, I don't think that's going to happen. But we definitely have people who are willing and able to run the shelters, you know?
I'm sorry, another what?
Another call.
Another cog, another vacuum,
Oh,
you know, like,
Okay.
yeah.
Did I hear you say that you're going to do some more sort of thinking about or refining of, I'm trying to avoid loaded words here, like structure. Do is I've been in contact with our counterparts across the street, county. We've got a team of folks that are continuing to actively look at sites and sort of figuring out logistically what we could have at each site. Talking to you about a group that might be able to come in and help with this. And things are refining and coming into greater focus. And it would be nice to reconvene. I suspect you're going to be interested in looking at the keyword search that was mentioned as it relates to.
We're happy there.
They ended up with a community land trust with more control to the citizens. But what you'll see here in Bellingham, and I encourage you to look it up because we have a lot of resources, but the Colshan Community Land Trust, again, it's like a community land trust, but it has all these requirements that alienate people that desperately need housing. So the very community land trust that's supposed to help us, where we pull money to provide these houses for people, is setting up things that prevent the people who need housing to get housing. So it's strange.
Y'all gotta stop putting like so much on the downtrodden. Like the amount of bullshit that you make us go through after we lose everything, including our own minds, it should be criminal. Like, I should not have to jump through my own asshole 6 times and beg and cry just so that I can get $45 from DD SAS so that I can serve my pedophile husband papers in jail. Like, the unmitigated greed that is in our government's nonprofit systems and the way you treat us when we go in for help is disgusting. and you will hear it from all my campers, and you'll hear it repeatedly and loudly from me, because I am one of the most able-bodied and seen as people to be able to relay the kind of horrific treatment I was given at the OC and at every single one of your community helper. I haven't gotten, and you know this because you guys watch my videos, I've gotten no help from any of them.
It's false.
To this day still, year and a half down the road, not one of those places helped me. I am not a drug addicted, I'm not that insane, I can hold down a job. Like, there is no reason, my child has special needs, there is no reason. My husband went to jail for molesting my oldest child. Like, again, no reason on earth why I shouldn't have received services. I am still living with my boss in her house because she took me in, because you guys offered me a tent. There is a huge issue with everyone that already exists. They are apathetic. They don't care about these people. They are burned out. They're not paid enough, and we're not putting enough of our funds back into those systems so that they could be helpful in the first place. And that's how you get us.
It's hard to have this discussion without going on the full systematic thing, and I see that, and it becomes really burdensome. I see that, so that's why I'm trying to say, there's a lot of whereases, but I'm hoping we come to some quick agreements that there's some standards that we don't want to fall below. And one of those standards is that these people out here deserve shelter.
Yeah.
They have been in the mud and in the ditches, down the Rocket Creek
They
Basin.
have trench
get
foot
chased around by
because they can't get
BPD.
dry. It's really sad.
Yeah.
You should see that. There shouldn't be requirements. And
I
when
just
you
wonder
have
about
those
these-
requirements, it's when you alienate the people who very desperately need that help. Not to get touchy, but it's very upsetting. They didn't do anything but be sick.
As HomesNOW is rolling in, the volunteer model is a much better model for these individuals. The staff paid models, like Missy was saying, is detrimental to the health of these individuals. Staff do not care. They are curious, seeking parent will upper movement to the stages where they can succeed in their business, which or in their profession, which is under rules of more professional management, which only cares about seeing their profit and seeing things which aren't
Ironically,
aren't
because it's
centered
nonprofit.
around the individuals' homelessness.
So as you were pointing out to me before, there are benchmarks that you want to hit. You know, it's like, okay, I've helped so-and-so get this far this week, and so therefore I've earned my check, kind of thing. Or this person met these requirements, and so we've moved them on, so I've done my job. But it isn't necessarily actually dealing with that person's real needs, more than just trying to fill in your checklist. And I understand. There's a lot of people, and maybe only one caseworker for 50 people or whatever, and it's like, I need to hit my checklist, man. So that's systematic cooked into. And so we've got to try and break that down and remove some of these barriers that are keeping the citizenry, I think. I just can't
He is
say it
removing the
differently
barriers.
than that.
There's just so many barriers when it's just it's supposed to be on the Constitution that we deserve the shelter no matter what.
Yeah.
Like
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Promote the general
life,
welfare.
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's
General
what
welfare.
this is all about. That's what I swore myself into this country as a citizen 5 years ago, and I'm not seeing that. So there's like a complete disconnect over what is intended and what is actually happening. Like, it's bad. You should go and meet the people who pretend to help, but it's very performative. It's very disappointing to see people sneer at the homeless, but also be in a position of power of helping the homeless. Like, they don't even want to talk to these people. They just usher them through. And if they don't work out, they don't work out. If they relapse, then they relapse, and then they deserve to be out on the street. If we can't find them health care, then we can't help them. Like, that should not be the motto, you know? It's weird that there's people making money off of it, and it's called a nonprofit. Like, there's something wrong with what's the current model is looking like. So y'all gotta examine that, because I know we are, and we don't have anywhere near the connections you guys have.
Certainly, the camp out, the largest stabilized camp out in Bellingham has not received a real visit from the hot team, and that's
The hot team came by 2 days ago. He came with 50 masks. We had plenty of masks and asked what we really needed. But they came by, I don't know the video. But yeah, he gave me 500 masks in a box and gave me insisted that he take a picture with me, the crew that he was helping, because the citizens were pushing on him, on the hot team, to come
To
help
help.
these citizens that they're responsible for.
So they help.
And he was more caring about saving the face of his institution rather than
Than helping.
helping.
That's what I meant by real outreach.
Yeah.
Like sometimes
That's so fucking, it was
you straight up, the solution is connecting with these people. You will meet the leaders of the nonprofits and they will be so out of touch because they just don't talk to these folks. They don't know who they are. They don't know them by their names. They're just a houseless community. But straight up, talking to these people connects you closer and removes that hierarchical difference.
Yes, the hierarchical difference that she keeps stressing on is very important for the mental health, and it's a quality-based care that makes them see that they are rehabilitated, so that they're not, outsiders who be shunned on. And that means so much. That's the improvements we're seeing out here is that equality that we can give.
I just have one, I really appreciate that. I'm not saying I disagree with the other things you guys said, but I really appreciate that.
There's like a huge disconnect, and you'll see this everywhere. You probably got hella flack for not representing the people like you should, but there's just so many examples of that same sentiment. Just the people not understanding the community they're leading. And so that's why we're so hesitant in establishing any sort of hierarchical stuff, because what we just did today is connect our supposed people that are leaders to the other ones doing direct action, to volunteers and the campers, because you cannot have leadership without the consensus of the community. You can't be serving a community if you don't know what they need. That's some self-absorbed stuff I just can't vibe with, and that's what you'll see in a lot of nonprofits. People who are out of touch with the issues that are happening.
They also, the hierarchy in that situation, and it goes with the raise and the status, I want to be this kind of counselor, so I'm going to go up this. People who have that kind of personality, who need to lead things like that, aren't always the best. Trump is president, okay?
They're not always the best.
The people that go into that kind of system with the idea that I'm going to run this almost always have some sort of psychotic power trip and need more therapy than the actual people in the camp.
And you'll see it
And that's
casually.
so toxic and dangerous.
There are people who I had to speak to because they were self-imposing a leadership position that didn't need to be had. Leaders are chosen. You don't just decide, I'm going to become this, because you are therefore barricading yourself from communicating to the people you're supposed to serve. Bless you.
So, this is a drag, but as you know, my 415. What's that? We'll get to that. So, I couldn't recall.
There's a huge opportunity to look at the very systems that are at work here that you guys can examine and look at.
I appreciate this
Dissect.
conversation. I've got somebody who's waiting for me in another. I'm going to just give a quick call.
We're going to thank you for your time, Seth.
Well, no, I'm just going to take care of this. I do have to split, but I would like to continue this tomorrow.
That's it.
Y'all are free.
Same time?
Pretty good that what we're envisioning is quite amazing, and we want to spin this as a leading national movement, which really reflects the housing, homeless situation. And we can, Bellingham, become
A great
leaders in a model
example.
that works for everybody in this whole country. I want that to be how we spin this whole situation. And I think you would really appreciate that too. And I do want you to envision and think about how we can lead a national crisis.
Examine the stuff that you've already learned and stuff like that. You'd be surprised at all the holes that are in the current stuff.
I think what we're trying to appeal to you is you could make a really good name for yourself if you jumped on this bandwagon of co-opting and helping these most destitute people. And Bellingham was the bastion of one of those frontlining towns. Look at all the people, you know, like, oh, look, Utah, this one town in Utah bought houses for everyone, and nobody's homeless. Like, we could be something like that. Like, Bellingham and Seth Fleetwood have made it almost impossible to be homeless with this co-opting, a whole new idea where we're not having leaders.
Co-opting,
Not
co-op, not co-opting.
Let me
Co-op.
look at tomorrow. Just hold on a second.
I work noon before tomorrow.
What is tomorrow?
Wednesday. We
Uh,
have class.
Hump day.
But, I mean, we got people.
So,
I'm free and liberally after.
after 4 o'clock. Theoretically, tomorrow, 2:30 is potential. That's the weekly governor's office call, that we don't, that's the, I don't need to be on that. Anyway, let's throw that out there as a 2:30. You've got some more questions you can just inquire about.
Well, I was just gonna ask how many people are, I mean, what kind of numbers are you talking
It's
about?
always going up.
Yeah.
It's always going up.
You
I
don't
mean, out on
know.
the lawn and so on, I mean, homeless people.
Well, I mean, there's certain practical things that are public.
Forgive me for running off.
Yeah.
I have to go. I'm late.
Thank you, sir.
You're good, you're good.
I'm not gonna
Get
go
your
very
ass
long
out.
down here.
So-
I don't know what I'm doing.
But you guys can wrap things up. I just propose this tentative time. I can get in touch with you or whomever, and maybe 2:30 is tomorrow is a possibility. We just reconvene after we've done that.
Does 2:30 work for everybody in this
That
room
works
this
for
moment?
me.
I got class, but we can find
That's
someone.
Let's say,
That's all right.
What's
Oh,
that?
Jessica probably knows.
It does?
Doesn't it? Doesn't?
I work till 4.
It works for me.
Works for you.
Well, I'm sorry.
I
We
can
can
probably
try,
get
but let's
that
just
to the
get in touch
good
tomorrow. We'll figure something out.
That's fine.
Let's talk in the morning, and have to deal with it.
That's fine.
Please do, and then, but I guess,
There was one question and I have 2 remarks.
can I split?
Please go.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
Go.
And Seth,
Catch
let me
up.
resort to one meditation. Homelessness is solvable.
It is solvable.
I will
Yeah.
tell you why.
we can do this.
Thank you, sir.
So just to kind of like give you the picture, like transparent on how our group is actually, when we have a mayor, we collaborate pretty well. Like we get a bunch of works people in the room. It's like, okay, and where the rubber hits the road is, okay, here's the site. How many people need to be on the site? Here's the configuration of the site. So all these things start really mattering at some point. So we would be looking at, we're going to try whatever site this is, it needs to accommodate X number of people.
Think about, like,
What are,
That's easy, that reflects the shelters that we do require. That's really much of a big
But-
say there would be couples, I think there would be certain exceptions to that, but it would be full couples, relatively typical, I'm not here to live with couples.
And you guys can spend some time, I'm thinking about that, and maybe it's a discussion point for tomorrow, but like, what is the number?
Yeah, we're looking at 50 pallet shelters now.
But I don't want to put it in terms of,
Are you-
because that's
Size of
a
the encampment?
county purchase, so if someone
This
said,
isn't
well,
about the size of the encampment, though.
And like, how did you come to that number? Like, what is the number and how did you come? You don't have to answer now, just like, what is,
I can throw out, but our experience with homes now, we really feel like going to like 30 is a big limit. And it's about the kitchen. The kitchen area is where it becomes, this is like communal kitchen, and there's just too many people in and out of the kitchen. So you almost need to graduate, so okay, now we got 3 people allowed in the kitchen, and it all comes out, and that turns into a whole other thing. So ideally, even if you have 50 shelters, say, okay, since we have 50 shelters, the ideal model that we see is around 20 is, it's what we try to do. And when I say we, I'm no longer with HomesNOW officially, but I know this inside now. And so what we've done is the kitchen tent. And so at that point, we're looking at, it's like, okay, so if I gave you 50 shelters, what would you do? I'd break them in half and put a fence between them and build 2 kitchens, is what I would do. And have 2 separate camps, the red team and the blue team or whatever on wristbands or whatever that is. So that you can easily do that. You can even have 4 villages on one site, even run by different partners.
yeah, it's kind of like a coalition in that sense where it's like multiple organizations are willing to cooperate like that. you
That's
know?
how co-ops work. You can have
That's how co-ops
intercooperative development. And I think what you're trying to figure out is like, okay, so per COVID and what we project is 20 shelters per site, right? And let's look at Philadelphia.
Probably 20 is like
It's safe. Yeah, so let's look at that Philadelphia precedence again, right? So 50 sites, right? 50 properties, 20 shelters. That's 1,000 people that have homes now. right? We're looking, we had 720, approximately 720 pre-COVID in the last census that were identified as homeless. And I mean, we've probably doubled that by now.
Oh, yeah, no, it's very widely accepted amongst most of the people who are dealing with homelessness in Bellingham and Whatcom County, that at that point in time, we probably had over 1,000 people in Whatcom County. But that 700 number is something that they had to physically, I counted that, and they kind of have to stretch their ideas of what's probably left. And so based on that, I would presume we're probably at least 1,500 people in Whatcom County right now.
At least.
And it can be done. There's, I have my whole thing, but there's like empty buildings, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It can be done.
So many
Property
empty buildings
allocation
right
is
now.
Key. Property allocation is key. And there's just so many barriers to just get the simple stuff, you know?
Yeah, definitely space, the space provided, how that's comfortable individuals and to work on the inner dynamics of relationships of the camp members. So I do feel maybe out back here might not be as big of a site and a little more open space. Well, it's comfortable for those members to have a healthy, peaceful, so, but I do agree with those numbers. But I would awfully be happy with taking both of those, splitting in half, as in 50, split in half, 25, and say like 5 couples, or make it 30. 30 is a good number. But we definitely want to get back to that.
Yeah, just echoing like the first part that Michael said is like having the having so many different sites and so many different properties for so many different like worker tenant cooperatives to build. You know, that's the really beautiful thing about cooperatives is that they are able to identify what their unifying values are and the like practices and just kind of like the guidelines that they establish for their own communities. And so that way it's possible for there to be community, right? Because it's something that they decide together and it's something that they all work towards together. It's something that they all sustain together.
And that's how you deal with the out-of-touchedness.
Mm-hmm.
You have people who know what they're doing and how to do it so that you don't like alienate these people or vilify these people like they've already been.
Yeah, allows opportunity for self-reflection and good intent. Are we meeting the actions of our intentions really creating the things we want to happen for the individuals that isn't right? I want the best for that individual, but maybe my methods aren't working well. So if your intent is the most important to you, you're willing to change that pattern of behavior, your own behavior, I would really hope that individuals, that's exactly the type of leadership we would have on our staff to self-correct.
And one addendum on numbers from me also, I think that behaviorally it's a lot more to manage when you have stack up too many people in congregate area. So, I think that, like what we have out here, it would take, to properly manage it with all the social workers that everybody needs, it would take a lot of volunteers to get these people on a program. Right now, we're doing triage out there. But they do need more. But so much comes from within that it's just a matter of facilitating that in manageable numbers. And so again, when I look at my crowd out here, I was like, 20 is a challenge, but it's doable from my perspective.
So have you guys looked into whatever legal steps are necessary to form an official cooperative?
Have we looked at that?
Oh, I see. I believe a cooperative needs to be an established entity for a certain amount of years. That's something I can check in on. We can also talk to different people. I know that there's a NWCDC, Northwest Cooperative Development Center out of Bellingham. They actually work on stuff like this, transition services for businesses to become cooperatives, as well as organizations to co-op. So there are resources out there. There are people that want this. Everybody on this feed wants this too. So
I'm understanding that nonprofits also get a chance, it's like, okay, I filed for my stuff, and that's usually enough for contracts to get started. And then they can catch up with their formation as they go. So maybe there'll be some room for that too. Ideally. Because we have to move now.
Yeah, and some of the basic things that we would require as a city is you have to have liability. I mean, I'm not, this isn't like a full, this is like legal thing.
Yeah.
Entity and insurance. And then every department's gonna have their own, you can take a look at the RFQ, I don't know, I've looked at that, but I mean, the city put a lot of work into the RFQ. I know you guys might not like the idea that an RFQ went out, but we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what kind of organization would we need to run a safe camping area.
And have you
And
talked
that
directly
RFQ
to?
is more restrictive.
I'm not, all I'm saying is these are like, when I look at something, you can adjust like the level of the monitoring, but it's the concepts. It's the concept. So I guess I'm saying, you know what? We're not going to require this kind of screen, or we're going to require some other kind of screen, or we're going to require no screen. But someone has to think about that and say, here's what it's going to look like. That's all I'm saying. It's not,
Yes.
Categories
Yeah.
that you might be
And I haven't looked at our RFQ, I just know that we put one out.
Okay, that's why I was trying to make you guys think about the idea of like making plans without talking to the community. Like you can come up with as many solutions as you think are great, but none of them are applicable or like they won't work if you're not working with the community, which is what the beauty of co-op is.
I will definitely have to question the quality of, you said, the hardware you put into the RFQ, because if you had, all you have to do is look at the model HomesNOW did with the lower RFQ, which you guys seem like you purposely placed this really high RFQ with a lot of professionals, paid staff that need to be there at all times, things like that, which do, as we have clarified, are detrimental to the health of individuals. But now that you ignore HomesNOW, which has done such an amazing job at turning over many individuals from streets, from sleep deprivation, manic states of
All kinds.
and they've found health and stability, pretty shelter, clean up.
And of course, more volunteers come from that great pool. They get rehabilitated, they love the community they're coming from. It's like, I got an apartment, but I spend most of my time here helping out. And I'd love to see that.
But that's a good point. Like I think you said, did you say the lower requirement? Like what happened at Winter Haven, we put a lot of thought into what the monitoring and the requirements were going to be for that. So those, I'm not saying that's what the city is going to necessarily be, but those are the categories to get your mind around. Okay, well, we want to do it. So you want to do it differently. I'm not saying the city would accept it, but here are the categories that the city thinks about when they think about, well, how is this going to work? How can we responsibly move forward? So I'm not trying to argue with you about whether it's too high or too low, but just, again, so like to be transparent, if I can find this 50-site operation in Philadelphia, there's going to be some paperwork. It's going to have some categories of things. There's no way we're going to take a Philadelphia solution and do it in Bellingham because Philadelphia is not Bellingham.
So
But
what,
it gives me the categories that I will use to think about. That's how I do a lot of my work.
so what happens if there is no precedent for what we're trying to achieve? Like, sometimes we have to get creative. And this is why I asked desperately for people like you guys who have the background to dissect the current models and see where they don't work.
I got to ask that same thing. I think that it's possible because we're observing a systematic failure in a lot of stuff. No finger pointing, no blame, just is. And it leaves people out. And so we have to be creative about how we have to systematically, holistically try to restructure. And so the requirements that you're requiring, maybe we need to put more of the requirements. Like I said, the government can afford to do some of this. If you purchase the shelters and we get through this year because you have to buy the shelters, but then next year you don't have to buy the shelters. Now we can look at a budget of like really starting to fill it from the government side. We're going to provide those people, and those people will be instructed to work well with these community organizations and flex with them and not be, the man.
Very much, these individuals are traumatized by systems, by people full of power, males of authority. You see them, discrepancy in their head arguing with themselves about all these past traumas that happened to them.
Just replaying it.
The structures which you create in your RFQs are exactly the type of systems which
Takes
create
people out on the
these
street.
and continue these down spiraling in mental health. A lot of these individuals we've seen are healthy, minded people just like me, but have been homeless for 2 years, so they're not really walking their head down. They're talking to themselves.
And they've been promised things. And there's trauma in getting promised something that's supposed to be your right. And there's people that don't believe in systems like that, in supposed models like that, because they're still out on the street. So how good is that model if there's still people out on the street? It's as simple as
I'm
that.
trying to look at other solutions. Someone's got to it's got to be okay. Well, here it is. Here's what we're both going to sign. So I'm just trying not to reinvent the wheel. I thought it sounded like you said there was a model out there. So I just like to look and see what it is.
I hope it is, because I'd like to reinvent the wheel if it's not.
Exactly. Exactly. If there is nothing for you to see precedent of, you need to think about starting
I'd like
a
that
new
to be easy
creative
for us
process.
too, but if it's not there, that doesn't lead to
Yeah,
the
well,
dilemma.
I just asked a question, you gave me an answer, and so I was going to go
Sure.
with it.
Yeah.
Sure,
Well, you'll see from the
I'm not trying to
Philly
argue about
incident.
whether it's good.
Well, I hope you're not getting that.
No.
It's not-
We don't
it's
get
just
that
a
vibe
simple-
from you.
It's just a simple exchange.
We don't give that vibe from you. I don't get that vibe from you. Like, I know you're just talking. Don't worry about it. But if you can't find what you need from Philly, feel free to look anywhere else. And if you can't find it there, then it's because the problem is so systemic that the issue is very much buried into our psychosis that we don't think there's a possible answer.
We
And that's
almost
where you need to
forgot
get
about the biometric facility. We're so shocked from COVID and everything else. The government almost forgot about the place. Honestly, Tyler went, huh?
No.
So, and bless him, he's been coming forward with some stuff. That's the kind of leadership, he's thinking outside the box. He pisses some people off.
You're
You know
upsetting,
what?
you're shaking it. You're definitely, like, get ready for some backlash.
As I said to Seth yesterday, we need to get a working model that's more accessible to more people immediately before the wave hits us. He's coming. And we all know it. It's coming. It's just about inevitable. I don't see how you could stage it without completely restructuring how we're dealing with COVID. The wave is coming. We're already seeing it. The tide's rising now. We got nice cars down on Cornwall because they just don't have clear people.
The amount of homeless people has been increasing year after year in the United States. That's not because, they don't want it fixed. It's because every system that's been implemented just doesn't work. So you're going to have to get creative. If you don't find the president, I'm sorry. But some people,
But we can all work on that together.
we can work on that together. Like, we have options. That's the thing. If that's the whole point of that lack of hierarchy. Like, if we want to get at your level, you're going to have to come down a little bit too. Shed that whole, we need this and this and this and this to get where we need to go, when community is land and land is community. We are you and you are us.
I'm really trying to definitely do that. I think that this process is helping us to get more community involvement in government and a more transparent, like you said, a better exchange, and we can, neighborly do this. And so this may be the year where we test ourselves and say, can the community do this? I don't know, but we have to do something. We can't push these people back into the bushes. And maybe Marcus is right. If we buy these shelters with the money we've got in Huckle Under, and there's some COVID dollars for that, then maybe next year we can just look at our budget and buy some people that we hire some people that we need to help those.
Vetted by the people who interact with such, like Michael was saying, people like Michael know what's going on with the infrastructural problems.